All right, guys, thank you for joining me. It's a pleasure to start in with you this opportunity. And well, as I told you yesterday, we're going to be starting with the listening section tonight. And of course, immersing ourselves into this very interesting topic. All right. So, well, as I always say, this class is recorded and you can also watch it on the YouTube channel later on. So let me please share my screen here because I have prepared a presentation for you. And we're going to be, of course, discussing this together. Okay, very good. So let me please enter here and let us start with our presentation tonight. Great. Let us start. So, well, as I say, our topic of interest throughout the week is going to be the listening section. And as I always tell you, like the listening section is very important because we have, of course, to listen a bunch of material, as you're going to be able to see later on. And it's important for us to, of course, respond and understand these questions correctly. And we're going to do so by a very good understanding of the theoretical patterns underlying those questions. But tonight, I want us to discuss some general aspects first, okay? So let us start with that. Let me please go to the next slide, and here we are. So let us discuss some general aspects of the listening section together, okay? First of all, this section, dear student, is going to help you to, or is going to be measuring or evaluating your ability to understand spoken English, of course. Now, there are two different spheres that are going to be evaluated in this part of the exam. The first one is basic comprehension. That is to say, how good you understand, of course, what you're listening. And now the second area is going to be pragmatic understanding. Now, maybe this area is a little bit more difficult for you to understand, but the best explanation I can offer you of this sphere that is going to be evaluated in the listening section is that it's basically the speaker's attitude and degree of certainty and how you connect and synthesize that information, all right? So these are the areas and spheres that, as I mentioned, are going to be evaluated in this part of the exam. Now, apart from that, there is something very important that we have to discuss together, and those are the two types of materials or items you're going to be confronting during the section, okay? Because as you know, you're going to be listening to spoken English. But what type of spoken English? Maybe you're wondering. And this is the response. In this type of the, in this part of the exam, you're going to be listening to two types of materials, and those are lectures and conversations. I know for some of you, the term lectures seems a little bit weird, but let me explain very rapidly and easily. Lectures are basically classes delivered by university professors that are recorded, okay? Of course, these are not complete classes, I don't know, lasting for 1 hour and a half, but you're going to be listening to some fragments, okay? Fragments of these classes delivered by university professors on a very, very wide spectrum of academic areas. Think about anything that could be taught in a university, varying from, I don't know, biology until computer science or nursery or laws or, I don't know, art, architecture. And those could be classes that you're going to listen to or fragments of classes you're going to listen to, all right? And of course, the rest, conversations. That's the second type of material, conversations. And I think they are very much understandable, right? Conversations of two speakers. You're going to be able to perceive and, of course, notice this later on when we practice, all right? But those are the two types of items and materials you're going to be confronting in this part of the exam. Now, maybe you're wondering how many of these materials am I going to get? Good question. And here I can respond that. Throughout the entire listening section, you're going to be receiving from 3 to 4 lectures, okay? There is a variation, as you can see there, you can receive whether 3 or 4 lectures. I'm going to explain why, but give me a second. The reason is that, well, or the thing here is that you're going to be listening to 3 to 4 lectures, and each of these lectures is going to last for approximately 3 to 5 minutes, okay? That is very important because you're going to be able to notice that these lectures are extensive, and that is going to require you to take notes in the future. And that is very important, okay? So have that in mind. And now, maybe you're wondering, what am I going to do after I listen to these 3 or 4 lectures that last for 3 to 5 minutes? Well, very simple. You're going to have to respond to questions about those lectures. That's interesting, right? Maybe you're saying, well, wait a minute. If I'm going to be responding about questions related to classes in universities that are, of course, on subjects like arts, physics, biology, engineering, computer science, nursery, etc., Does that mean that I have to know something about those areas or disciplines before I get into the exam? And the response is no, you don't have to, okay? Because the questions they're gonna make to you are not questions about your external knowledge of those subjects. So please don't study, let's say, chemistry or biology in order to come and perform on the listening section. No, it's not necessary. What you have to do is to simply pay attention to what they tell you about those subjects. For example, let's say one of your lectures is about biology, and the professor, when you listen to him in your lecture, right, is discussing, I don't know, Darwin's evolutionary theory. So he's going to be talking about different aspects of that theory. And at the end, when you listen to that lecture, you're going to have to respond 6 questions about Darwin's evolutionary theory, but with the information the professor gave you. They're going to request information, they're going to make some questions, but not about your external knowledge of Darwin's evolutionary theory, but about what they told you on that issue. That is to say, what the professor said about Darwin's evolutionary theory, okay? And the same for all your disciplines and lectures you listen to. And that's the first type of material. Then, how many conversations are you going to listen? Conversations of 2 speakers, by the way, as I told you, from 2 to 3 conversations. Now, there's once again a variation here. You can receive from 2 to 3 questions, whether 2 or 3. I'm going to explain why, okay? And the thing is that each of these conversations is going to last for 3 minutes. As you can see, they are, in this case, smaller. They are shorter than the lectures. And that is also the case, by the way, for the questions, because as you remember, per lecture, you had to respond 6 questions. But the case for the conversation is that you're going to have to respond 5 questions. 5 questions per conversation, okay? 1 less question than lectures, all right? So as you can see, that's the panorama for this materials, okay, in the listening section. It's very important. Now, one thing I want to say before I talked about the variation, why is this variation happening? I want to discuss here this very much quickly, and is that you can take notes, okay, dear students, on any audio item throughout the test to help you answer the questions. Yesterday, we talked about in the introductory class, if you have not watched that class because you didn't have the opportunity to attend, please go to the YouTube channel you have in the description of the WhatsApp group and make sure to watch that class because we discussed a lot of important aspects about the TOEFL exam, the basics of the TOEFL exam. We discussed the modalities of the TOEFL exam, a bunch of very important information, okay? Now, as we said yesterday, if you're going to take the IBT version, that means that you have to go out of your home in order to take the exam at a test center. It could be a building, a university, a high school, any place that is authorized and certified by ETS and that is displayed in its official website, as we discussed yesterday. That's the reason why I say, please go and watch the class. Now, the thing here is that, as we said yesterday, when you go to this place in order to take the exam, yesterday I told you very clearly, right? You don't have to worry about anything when you go to this place because all the material, the equipments you need to take the exam are going to be provided to you by the test center you attend to, okay? So as you can see here, I'm telling you that you can take notes on any of these audio items, doesn't matter if it is a conversation or a lecture, during all the time you're listening to them, okay? And that means, of course, that you need to have some sort of material to take your notes on. And the sheets of paper, pencils, erasers, if it is necessary, to take notes in the IBT version, when you have to go to a test center, are always going to be provided to you by the test center. So you don't have to bring with you to the test center any piece of paper or pencil or eraser. First of all, because they are not going to allow you to enter the computation with that, okay? And secondly, because as I say, they provide you with everything you need. Doesn't matter if it is a pencil, a sheet of paper, an eraser, whatever you need is going to be provided to you. Okay, it's not necessary for you to worry about that. And as I said, you can take your notes on that while you're listening, by the way, to this material, while you're listening to the conversations, while you're listening to the lectures, because there is no like a special or a specific time for you to take notes after you listen. No, you have to take notes while you listen, as you listen, okay? When you're listening to the conversation or to the lecture about Darwin's evolutionary theory, for example, as you are listening, you have to also take your piece of paper and your pencil, and you have to take your notes as you listen, okay? Because there is no, I don't know, a specific time to do so later on. No, you have to do it, as I say, while you listen, okay? Now, this varies a little bit when you're taking the home IBT version, because as we discussed yesterday, when you're taking the home IBT version, you don't go to a test center to take the exam, right? We discussed this. Therefore, you cannot trust the test center to give you everything you need, because you are the one who has taken the responsibility to provide all the equipment you need, the computer you need, the keyboard you need, the mouse you need, the microphone and headphones you need in order to take the exam, all right? Now, in the home IBT version, of course, nobody's gonna give you a piece of paper. And sadly, you cannot use one either. Why? Because if you're gonna take the home IBT version, if you're planning to take the exam at home, that means that you're not gonna be able to use sheets of paper and pencils to write down your notes, okay? Instead of using that very much common material, you're gonna have to get a whiteboard. Let me explain this here. You're gonna have to get a whiteboard. You know what is a whiteboard, right? A whiteboard is basically, una pizarra blanca that is very much utilized nowadays in universities, right? In order to, of course, for professors to make some, I don't know, some notes, or to make some points, and to ask their students to make some, or I don't know, to make some sort of assignments, or to do an activity, something, right? They write on these whiteboards. And you need to get one of those in order to take the home IBT version, because as I said, they do not allow you to take notes on paper. You need to get one of these whiteboards, and you cannot get one of those very large whiteboards that professors utilize in universities. You need to get one desktop whiteboard, not tamaño escritorio, very much a small whiteboard, and there you can write down your notes with erasable marker. This is, as I say, if you're going to take the home IBT version. If you're not going to move out of your home to take the exam, because you're going for the home IBT version, as we discussed yesterday. So you need to provide yourself with that. You can purchase it, you can borrow it, whatever, but you need to get one of these small whiteboards in order to take the exam there, right? Now, very important then, have this in mind, okay? Because it's tremendously necessary for you to do so. And trust me that at the end, well, this is going to be very much important to you, okay? Now, as I say, erasable marker, you're going to have to get it as well, and you can write your notes with that, okay? And of course, if you think about it, that means that if you're going to use this whiteboard that is very small, you're not going to have like a lot of space to write down your notes, right? That means that if you are not, for example, somebody who can make very small letters, you're going to have to erase probably something you wrote previously in order to continue writing notes. And that could be, of course, a little bit troublesome. So all these things must be taken into consideration when deciding what version of the TOEFL exam you would like to take, okay? Very important. So that's what I wanted to discuss, okay? Now, overall then, coming back to our previous topic, the listening section lasts for approximately 41 to 57 minutes, okay? I repeat, from 41 to 57 minutes. Now, as you can see, there is once again a variation here. Why? And this is what I wanted to talk about. And remember this, because in the future, in the following weeks, we're going to continue talking about this. But in the TOEFL exam, there is something called the experimental version. Listen very well to my words. There is something called the experimental version. What is the experimental version? Let me explain, first of all, what is the common version of the listening section, okay? The common version of the listening section is when you receive 3 lectures and 2 conversations. I repeat, when you receive the common version, or the common manner, let's say, of the listening section, you will receive 3 lectures, 2 conversations to listen to and to respond to, and then you will have 41 minutes to listen and respond to all that material. That's the normal version of the listening section. 3 lectures, 2 conversations, and 41 minutes in order to listen to and respond all the questions, okay? Now, if you receive the experimental version, the only thing I mean by the experimental version is that you get extra material. What is that? That if you get the experimental version, then you're going to have to receive 4 lectures instead of 3, 3 conversations instead of 2, and you're going to have 57 minutes to listen and complete all this material instead of 41. Now, maybe you are thinking, what determines if I get the experimental or the normal version of the listening section? And the response is nothing. Why? Because this is totally aleatory. If you receive the normal version that contains less material and less time, that is something totally random and aleatory. I cannot tell you, for example, next week, if you want to take the exam before the year ends, go and take it, because the exam is not going to have the the experimental version of the listening section. Because as I said, this is unpredictable. We cannot know. Okay, you can receive it as you cannot. Some people receive it, some people do not receive it. Now, you shouldn't worry. Okay, maybe you're saying, oh, but that's unfair. What if I get the experimental version? So I have to respond more. I'm going to be more tired. And what if I get more wrong answers? You shouldn't be worried about that. Why? Because, dear students, think about the experimental version not as something that it is used in order to punctuate you or to evaluate you. The experimental version is basically a manner that ETS, remember ETS is the company, right, that organizes, administers the exam, is a manner that ETS utilizes in order to improve its material. Because in this extra lecture and conversation you're going to get, if you receive the experimental version on the day of your exam, what's going to happen is that you're going to receive new types of questions. You're going to receive new types of mechanisms to respond to questions, new times, for example. And what they are doing with you is to use you. Okay, I know it sounds bad, but they are utilizing you to test their new material, to test the new upgrades they want to make to their exam. Think about it as if you were their hamster, basically. They are using you in that case. And if you think about it, you're saying, okay, that's bad, they are using you. But no, because they are using you, yes, but they are not using you and punishing you at the same time. Why? Because this extra material they give you is never used to evaluate your performance. That is to say, the only material and questions they are going to evaluate to respond to are always going to be the normal 3 lectures and 2 conversations you're going to get. Doesn't matter if you get the normal version or the experimental version of the exam. Now, if you get the experimental version, this extra material, as I said, that they give you, an extra lecture and an extra conversation to listen to, are merely, as I say, exercises that they use to check out their material, to check out if they are doing well on the exam, what can they improve, etc. But that new or those new exercises or lectures and material they offer you is not utilized to punctuate you. Therefore, that cannot affect you. If you respond, for example, to all the 6 questions, to all the 6 extra questions you will get in the experimental version, that is not going to affect you because, as I say, they do not take it into consideration for evaluating you. They merely use it as a matter to know if they are doing well on the exam, what could they improve, etc., etc. So as I say, if you receive the experimental version and you receive this extra lecture with 6 extra questions to respond, and this extra conversation with 5 extra questions to respond in the experimental version as we are discussing, don't worry, simply receive it, listen to it, and respond. Because at the end, as I mentioned, this experimental, that is basically an extra material, is not utilized to evaluate you. They are not going to take that into consideration. So you shouldn't worry about that. The only thing they are going to consider to evaluate you is the normal material you would get if you receive the normal version or the experimental version, all right? That's what happens. And that's the reason why we have this variation here. But it's very much easy to understand, actually, okay? And please, last thing I want to say before you make some questions, do not think that, for example, some people say, all right, so I'm gonna get, if I get the experimental version, an extra lecture and an extra conversation. I'm gonna receive 4 lectures instead of 3, 3 conversations instead of 4, and 6 extra questions to respond, and 5 extra questions to respond. So if that happens to be, if you are telling me that that is not going to be used to evaluate me, why don't I simply skip them? That is to say, if I know that the 4th lecture and the 3rd conversation is part of the experimental version, and if I know that they are not going to evaluate me with regard to those questions, why do I simply do not skip them, or I do not complete them if they are not important or relevant to my qualification? And the response is actually very much simple, because you do not know which of the lectures they give you is the extra one. Yes, they give you 4 lectures, but you do not know if it is the first one, the second one, the third one, or the 4th one, the one that is the experimental version. You do not know. They do not tell you. They are not, for example, like, they're not going to put a message on your screen that says, this is the experimental version completed. No, they simply do not tell you. They make it as if it were natural. So as I say, please respond to all the questions and listen carefully to all the material as if you knew that every single one of those materials is relevant to your qualification. Do not be confident and say, well, the 4th one is going to be the experimental one, so I'm not going to respond it. What happens if you were wrong? And that one was not the experimental version. It was the second one that you, I don't know, that you did respond, but was not important. How do you know? You cannot know, as I said. So please, when responding and listening, listen to everything carefully and respond to everything very much responsibly. All right? That is what you should do in this case. All right? Is there any question, dear students, with regard to anything we have discussed until this point, the general aspects or the experimental version, something? Questions? Questions here? Lucia, Lenny, Karen, Yvonne, Fla, Maya, Richard. Any question with regard to this?
I think the questions maybe when we are practicing,
Mhm.
but not so good. So far, so good.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Lenny. Fantastic. So awesome. So if there are no questions, then we're going to move on to show you this on the simulator. I think that it's important for you to always have a view of how these sections actually look like, because it happened to me when I prepared myself for this exam. As I told you, I didn't have any type of class like this one, that I took a lot of simulations and material that I found out on the internet. But it happened to me that when I came to the actual exam, everything was so different, like the way it was organized, the menu, the screen, and I was honestly lost. So we have the simulator here at the company, and it's very much similar, it's almost identical to how the exam actually looks like on the day of the exam. So please look at this, look at my screen, and you're going to be able to see what's going to happen on that day, how your screen is going to be organized, what type of menu are you going to have, etc. Okay, so look at this. When you get into the listening section on the actual exam, the first thing you receive is this, directly, a lecture or a conversation. Now, maybe you were wondering about this. I told you, you're going to receive two different types of materials, lectures and conversations. But maybe there's a question, you say, okay, but what is the order? Am I going to receive all the lectures first and then the conversations, or it's going to be by right? And the response is, once again, we do not know. The process they use in order to determine the order in which you receive the passages, whether they are lectures or conversations, is once again aleatory. It could be that all your lectures come first and then your conversations, or it could be by right, one lecture, one conversation, one lecture, one conversation, etc. And at the end, it doesn't matter, okay, dear students, because you're going to have to respond to all of this material at the end. And if you think about it, the order is just irrelevant, okay? But as I say, it's totally aleatory. You could receive, or you could receive in this case, all your lectures first and then all the conversations, or as I mentioned, it could be mixed up, okay? In this case, for example, I'm gonna display this.
Listen to part of a lecture.
Okay, notice, so in this case, it's a lecture. The first material we're getting in this simulator is a lecture. In your exam, it could be a conversation first and then a lecture. Irrelevant, as I say, not very much important, okay? The order is not important. Now, notice that here, in this opportunity, I can initiate, reproduce this lecture, and I can pause it if I want. Right? I can pause it. I can look, for example, I can skip it like this, for example. I can make it back. I can, etc. Right? So notice, in this case, I have almost entire complete upon the lecture. Now, is that going to be the case on the exam? I tell you sadly, no. Okay? You are not the person who reproduces the lecture. The computer automatically reproduces the lecture for you. And that means, of course, that you are not able to pause the video at any point if you didn't listen to something very much carefully or you didn't understand something. And by the way, you merely listen to these passages once. You listen to this lecture once, and then never again. You listen to the conversation that is going to come after once and never again. As I say, it's just once, okay? And as I mentioned, you cannot reproduce it by yourself or to pause it and to reproduce it once again. No, the computer reproduces it automatically and it goes right unto the end. And you can listen to that once. That's the reason why I told you notes become very important. Why? For the very simple reason that our memory is not perfect. And as you're going to be listening to something related to science for approximately 5 minutes, of course, that your mind is not going to be able to remember everything. Therefore, as I say, as you listen, while you listen to this, you need to take your material, whether it is a piece of paper in the IVT version or your small desktop in the home IVT version, and to write down your notes as you listen to this, because you're going to use all that information you consider relevant to respond to questions on this lecture later, okay? So please have this into consideration, right? So when the lecture ends, when the lecture is finalized like this, for example, right? When you finalize listening to this, the computer is once again going to take you to the next menu automatically. You don't have to press anything, okay? What is the next menu? This. The questions, as I told you, after you listen to each material, you're gonna have to confront, in the case of lectures, 6 questions, and in the case of conversations, 5 questions. In this case, if you look at this, you get here a question, right? It says, what is the main purpose of the talk? We're going to be discussing tomorrow all the different types of questions that we can find on the listening section. So don't worry about this. We're going to be able to respond to these questions very easily because I'm going to teach you how to do it, okay? But anyways, just for today, what I want you to notice is, first of all, that the responses are multiple choice, which means that during all the listening section, you are never going to have to type your responses, okay? Never. You are never requested to type your responses. You don't have to write anything. You have to choose your responses by clicking on them, okay? Like this. That is the only thing you do. Okay, so never worry about, do I have to type my responses? No, you don't have to. You simply have to choose one, okay? Out of the possibilities they give you, because as I say, there are multiple choice, okay? Very important. Now, so next thing I want you to notice. Here, for example, on my screen, there is a chronometer. And this is what I told you, that this simulator is almost identical to the exam, not perfectly identical. Why? Because on the actual exam, dear students, as I told you, if you receive the experimental version, you have 57 minutes to listen and complete everything. And in the normal version, you get 41 minutes. Now, that time they give you, you are not going to administer it. For example, you read this question, right? And you say, well, this question, I remember it. And you responded, let's say, in 10 seconds. What is going to happen? If you respond this in 10 seconds, fine. Why? Because per question, you have a limit of 45 seconds to respond. I repeat, for each of these questions you're going to get in lectures and conversations, you have a limit, or you have, excuse me, a limit of approximately 45 seconds to respond. And by the way, there is not going to be a chronometer on your screen that tells you how much remaining time you have for responding. That means that you are going to have the obligation, let's say, to respond as fast as you can. First of all, because you do not know how much remaining time you have. And secondly, because, as I say, there is not a fixed time they give you. But of course, we've made our calculations and it's approximately 45 seconds. I don't know why ETS does not reveal how much exact time they give for each of these questions. I guess it's because they want to maintain secrecy or something. But as I say, they don't give you a chronometer to tell you how much you have for responding this. And by the way, it is approximately 45 seconds as a maximum, okay? So if you respond in less than that, fantastic. You respond, let's say, in 10 seconds, you are very sure about your response. What can you do in order to see the next question? As you can see, there is a button here that says next. It is also going to be present on the day of the exam. If you press it, if you press next, you're going to be able to see the second question about the same lecture, right? The same lecture you listened to. As I told you, you have to respond 6 questions per lecture. This is the second one of the lecture we received. Now, look at this. It's once again a multiple choice response. In this case, for example, it tells you choose 2 answers. We're going to be discussing this. There is the possibility that some questions are going to request out of you to choose 2 different answers instead of just 1. Okay, we're going to talk about that later. Don't worry. But the thing is that once again, it's multiple choice. As you can see, you don't have to write down anything. You don't have to type anything, right? In this part of the exam at least. That's it. Now, notice what happens if you do not respond this question in 4 or 5 seconds. If you didn't click on any of these responses and you have your question in blank, the computer is going to take you automatically to the next question. I repeat, if you do not respond this question in 45 seconds, the computer is going to take you automatically to the next question. And what happens when you go to the next question? So this is the second one, right? What happens if the computer takes you to the third question? As you can see, there is no a button that says previous. And this is also going to be the case on the exam. You're not going to have a button to go to the previous question, to go back, sadly. So when you are in this question, you have 45 seconds to respond it, and that's all the time you have to responding this question and for answering it. You cannot go back to it, okay? You have to know that. So if you cannot go back to questions, that is a very interesting thing, because if you cannot go back, that means it is not a good idea to leave questions in blanks, because some people say, hey, professor, what happens if I say, I'm not sure about this response, I would like to leave it in blank and to come back later? You cannot. Sadly, you cannot. As I said, you have the responses here. All of them are multiple choice, yes, but you shouldn't leave them in blank, because as I say, you cannot go back to these questions. And now maybe you're saying, but what if I get it wrong? Because I'm telling you, never leave it in blank. Guess. If you are not sure about a response, guess. Go for the one you consider to be the most plausible one. Now, but maybe you're saying, hey, but what if I get it wrong? What if I go for the wrong answer if I'm not sure? Doesn't that going to affect me negatively? And the response is no. That is not going to affect you negatively. Why? For the very simple reason, there are students that in the TOEFL exam, there is no penalty for wrong answers. The only thing that is considered in order to punctuate your performance are good answers, correct answers, right answers. If you get, for example, this question wrong, that is not going to affect you negatively. It's simply not going to count, okay? It is not going to count. But if you get it right, it is going to count, of course. If you get it wrong, it is not going to count. But if you get it wrong, nothing is going to reduce your qualification. It's simply going to remain neutral. But if you get it right, as I say, more points to you, fantastic. But if you get it wrong, nothing. Once again, neutral, okay, neutral. So please have that into consideration. It's very important, okay? My honest recommendation to you, never leave questions in blank. Always respond, even if you're guessing, even if you're going for the answer you consider to be most accurate, most plausible, more plausible, more accurate. If that's the case, go for that one. It's okay. At the end, it's totally fine, okay? But remember, you cannot go back, all right? So if you don't want to stay here, let's say for the 4 or 5 seconds, you have responding each of these questions. Let's say you respond this one in 10 seconds and you are very sure about your response. So you would like to go to the next question, you can press next if you want. But once again, I repeat to you, you cannot go back if you have pressed that button, and if you have gone, of course, next, if you have gone to the next question, okay? It's very important for you to know that. So look at this once again. This is a question, right? And you have the answers here. You choose this one if you want, next, and that's it, and that's it. So what happens when you go to the next question and to the last question? Because as I told you, per lecture, you have to respond 6 questions, right? So what happens when you get to the last question? When you get into the last question and you responded, right? And you press next, or the computer takes you to the next part, you're gonna receive the next material. And now, as you can see here, it says, listen to a conversation between a student and her professor. In this case, our second material is not a lecture, it's a conversation. That's the reason why I told you the order in which you receive your material is totally aleatory, okay? So given that it's totally aleatory, you can simply relax and listen to whatever they give you, okay? In this case, it's a conversation.
Listen to a con.
It's a little bit shorter than the lecture we had before. But as I said, that's once again very much flexible. Sometimes they're in the same length, but sometimes they're less than the lectures, okay? So yeah, once again, when you listen to this, the computer is going to take you automatically to the questions, as you can see here, and you have to respond per conversation 5 questions, okay? That's it with regard to the menu, with regard to the screen you're going to be looking at on your exam. And well, is there any question with regard to this menu? What's going to be happening here? Something that I could clarify? Please tell me. Is there any question with regard to this? Questions about this? Lucia, Lenny, Karen, Maya, Yvonne, or Fla? Questions? No?
Teacher?
Yes, tell me, Lenny.
Okay, to sum up, we are going to listen once the material. It could be a conversation or it could be a lecture. And after that, we are going to answer the questions, right?
Yes, exactly.
Okay, it's good.
All right, fantastic. Any other question, dear students, apart from that? Any other hesitation, doubt here? Something I could clarify? No? All right, no questions. Very good. So great. if there are no questions, then we're going to stop looking at the simulator and we're going to come back to our presentation. Why? Because as I told you, something tremendously important of this section is to take notes, all right? And when you take notes, okay, you can say, well, I take notes on my own. That is to say, I do it with my own style. Fantastic if you do it. Now, think about this. These lectures are large. They last for 5 minutes approximately, and the conversations for 4 minutes. That means that as you are listening, you're going to have to take very fast and efficient notes. And what I want to offer you is some type of, I don't know, technique or strategy to improve the efficiency of your notes. I do not want to offer you a system for taking notes because I've seen on the internet so many systems and strategies for taking notes that I think are not actually very much productive. Why? Because when they offer you super complex systems for taking notes and etc., the only thing they do at the end is to compose you to pay more attention to your notes instead of the listening passages that at the end, taking notes is merely a secondary and auxiliary mechanism you use for responding to questions. But your priority should always be to listen to this material and to internalize it. So instead of giving you a very complex system to take notes, I just want to give you some recommendations that could help you to improve your organization, your efficiency, and of course, your rapidity, okay? So let us discuss them. So we have discussed this already, that if you're gonna go to the test center in the IBT version, to take the exam, you don't have to worry about sheets of paper, pencils, erasers. They give you everything. They provide you with everything, okay? Not the same if you're taking the home IBT version, because you need to provide yourself with the whiteboard and also, of course, with the erasable marker, okay? Now, second recommendation, what you can do to save and maintain order is to prepare your sheet with some points marking the beginning of each note. What do I mean by this? So when you have your blank sheet of paper, right, or your whiteboard, doesn't matter, the first thing you should do is to mark some points like these ones. Why? Because when you mark these points, dear students, when you make some sort of sign, some sort of indicator that tells you, hey, here you're starting your notes and here you're finalizing and ending your notes, this becomes tremendously important. Why? Because remember, later you want to come back to these notes in order to review them because you are not sure about a question that is asking for a particular piece of information you do not remember very well. If that's the case, you want to come back to your notes and reread them once again very rapidly in order to look for that very little piece of information and to respond to the question. In order to do so, you need to have organization and to make your notes, of course, as I say, well balanced in order for you to read them very easily. So my recommendation, try to make 2 different columns, okay? With points marking the beginning, as I say, and also, of course, the end of each of your notes. And by doing so, when you come back to review your notes, it's going to be way easier for you to read them very rapidly. And also, of course, to know where your notes end and where do they, of course, initiate, okay? It's very important to have this type of organization. Of course, you can vary here the sign or the order. You can do that as you want, but please try to make some sort of indicator of your notes when they are starting and when they are finalizing, okay? Very important. Now, further, try not to be very extensive, okay, dear students, with any of your notes. Write down just general ideas, as concise as you can. Remember, you are not listening to write. You are writing to remember what you have listened. So many people are confused about this because they think that notes are going to be evaluated, and notes are not going to be evaluated. Nobody's gonna say, well, give me your notes. I want to read them in order to see if you are doing a good job. No, nobody's gonna request your notes. Actually, what they want is you not to have your notes, because when you finalize the exam, they do not give you the opportunity to get out of the place you're taking the exam in, if you're taking the IBT version, with the notes you have taken. And the same for the IBT home edition. They do not give you the opportunity to have your whiteboard with the notes you have taken. They ask you to erase it. And the reason is because they don't care about notes, and actually they want secrecy with their notes. So don't worry if you're writing with ugly letters, if you don't have a very straight writing, right? If you're writing like in curves or something, or in a circular manner, don't worry about that. because at the end, nobody's going to evaluate that. Nobody's going to say, hey, what a terrible note. No. And remember, the thing here, you could actually take this section without taking notes. You could do it, of course, why not? The thing here is that if you are taking notes, it's because you want to remember what you're listening, right? But the priority, as I told you, must always be to listen carefully and to internalize what you're listening. You could do it without taking notes if you want, if you are able to remember everything and to internalize it super well. But because we are not perfect, of course, with our memory and mind, we are, in this case, taking notes in order to remember things. But in order to remember things, we need to, first of all, understand them. So please, your priority must always be to understand and internalize and then write, okay? Writing is just a second thing. So please never prioritize your notes instead of listening, okay? That happens too much, trust me. Next recommendation, okay? You should write down only information words in your notes, dear students. Let me define what information words are. Information words are meaningful words that contain significance, such as, for example, people or places, actions, and descriptions. For example, what happens if I tell you, I don't know, the word table? What comes to your mind immediately when I tell you table? Well, a piece of wood, right? A piece of furniture we use in order to, I don't know, have lunch, or in order to prepare meetings with somebody, or to have dinner, or that we use in order to do homework, etc. That's a table. So when I say that word, table, the idea of a piece of wood that helps and serves for all those purposes comes to your mind immediately. That's an information word because it has significance. It represents something very much objectively. Now, if I tell you the word dot, I repeat, if I tell you the word dot, what comes to your mind? Nothing in particular, right? If I tell you the word dot, why? Because the word dot, it's simply, and I'm not saying dots like punto, simply dot like, let me write it here on the chat box, like that, like this, like dot, right? If I tell you this word like dot, nothing comes to your mind, particularly a list, because that is a connector and it's a preposition, right? It makes sense to you if I use it in combination with other words. But remember that here, our idea or our objective is to write short and small notes, right? And as we're trying to write very short notes, of course, we do not want to have a lot of words to make it very much contextualized and with a lot of information. So the idea is try to leave out that type of word, like the word that I wrote here in the chat box, because those are function words. And function words like prepositions, articles, auxiliary verbs, modals like may or could, like provide almost no useful information about the material you're listening to, okay? So remember, information words, words that represent and transmit ideas rapidly, because as I told you, what you want with your notes is to come back, review them rapidly, and to remember, right? So whatever helps you to remember ideas rapidly is what you should include in your notes. So look at my box here on the right side of my screen. We have a sentence, and imagine this sentence is something you listen to in your lecture. For example, if your lecture says, insomnia, a consistent difficulty in falling or staying asleep, is the most common of these sleep disorders. If you listen to that and you believe that this is an important piece of information you want to take notes on, how could you do it? How could you take a note on this? I tell you, a very good note you could take on this entire sentence are these three words I have below: insomnia, common disorder. Why? Because these three words are all of them information words. When you read them, ideas come to you immediately. Insomnia, somebody who cannot sleep. Common, well, I don't have to explain it. And disorder, well, I don't have to explain it either. Those are words that explain like themselves, basically. They come to you very rapidly. So these are the types of words you want to write down as your notes. Because, for example, if you write instead of insomnia, common disorder, insomnia is one of the most common disorders, you're not only going to be wasting your time, but the word is the most common. I mean, the most or the or is are words that are not necessary for you to get these ideas. You simply need the information words. So those function words like is, like the, like must, like may, like could are simply useless. Don't write them down, okay? Simply write information words. And we have the second sentence, for example, as another illustration. It is not uncommon for people suffering from insomnia to experience increased levels of anxiety. about their inability to fall asleep. How could you take notes on this? Well, more anxiety falling asleep. Once again, all of them information words, representing ideas, representing something specific, and that of course helps you to get a very good vision on, and of course a very good memory on what you already listened. That's what I tell you. Make your priority always understanding and listening carefully what you are given, because when you understand a material and you internalize it, the necessity of having something to remember is not actually very much important. But when you have the necessity to remember something, remembering is easy whenever you have comprehended what you listen to, okay? So always try to remember by paying attention instead of writing notes, okay? This is just, as I say, an auxiliary mechanism we use. So that's the third recommendation. And now I have a final one, and it's this one. Try to write abbreviated words, all right? Now, that's the recommendation as such, but maybe you're telling me, how could I abbreviate my words? And I tell you this. You remember the difference between consonants and vowels, for example? Vowels consist of the letters A, E, I, O, and U, right? And sometimes Y. Consonants are all the letters that, of course, are not part of that very much esoteric list, like B, C, D, F, and so on. So here's the interesting part. Vowels are so common in English and also in Spanish, of course. You could write a word without any of its vowels and still understand the meaning. Look at my screen, for example, here. Some illustrations. The word sleep. If you want to take notes on this, right? And you have just listened to a lecture on insomnia. If you write down SLP instead of writing SLEEP, tell me if that is not more effective. Of course it is. Because you're writing something with less words, you're paying less attention to your notes, you're making it way more easy and manageable. And of course, when you read, it's also way easier to understand. The word symptoms, SMPTMS. Depression, DPR, SM. Now, maybe you're telling me, but at some point, it's going to be difficult for me to understand a word without any of its vowels. Well, in that case, throw in one vowel if you believe it's necessary for you to understand it, like anxiety, for example. Write it with some vowels, or create, write CRETE, it's fine. Now, as I told you, this is just one manner to abbreviate your words. I have had some students, for example, that were very ingenious, and the way they abbreviated their words was by simply writing half of the word, or the first 3 letters, for example. If they were having the necessity to write down sleep, instead of writing sleep completely, they just wrote SLE. Or instead of writing symptoms entirely, they just wrote simp. Or depression, depress, right? As you can see, you can abbreviate words as you wish, as you prefer, as you consider to be more, I don't know, efficient and accurate. That's fantastic. But at the end, dear students, what you have to do, what you are trying to do, is to abbreviate them, because you want to take less time in writing them, and when reading them, you want to do it more easily and rapidly. Okay, so these recommendations, I think, are important, very much necessary for your comprehension on this topic. And if you apply all these recommendations when taking notes, trust me, you're going to be able to write very efficient notes that are easy to read and remember. And that way, you're going to be able to access your information very, very much quickly. Okay. Is there any question with regard to these strategies or techniques? Something that I could clarify, maybe? Please tell me. Questions about this? Lucia, Lenny, or Karen, or Maya, or Yvonne, or Fla? Questions on this part? No questions? All right, no questions then. So, as you can see, this is it. This is what I wanted us to discuss tonight. And tomorrow is going to be very important, because as you can see here, I have the types of questions you will find in this section. And I told you yesterday that one of the reasons why I love the TOEFL exam is because it's super repetitive. And when you have something that is repetitive, you can systematically approach it, right? So tomorrow we're going to approach in a very systematic manner the types of questions that you're going to find in this particular section. And by doing so, you're going to be able to respond with consistency, every single one. Doesn't matter if you're practicing or in the actual exam, all right? So please don't miss tomorrow's class. It's going to be super important for you to practice with me this Wednesday and Thursday. So we're going to be learning about this tomorrow. Okay, very good. So if there are no more questions, then we're going to finalize here. And what I want to do right now is I'm going to take your assistance before you go, as always, as I told you, okay, in order for you to receive your certificate later on when we finalize these classes. And as I do so, let me stop sharing here. Tell me with your kind responses to our traditional poll, all right? I always appreciate your responses. And then if you have any question or commentary, please let me know, okay? Of course, I'm always very much glad and eager to help you, all right? So please listen to your names and say present when you listen to yours, all right? Let's go. So do I have here Richard Fernando? I think Richard was here, I remember, but he left. No, say present, anyways. What about Lenny Jimenez?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, thank you very much, dear Lenny. What about Yvonne Cana?
Here.
Thank you very much, Yvonne. What about Maya Mariel?
Present.
Thank you very much, Maya. What about Flavia Montaño?
Present.
Thank you very much, Flavia. What about Karen Ginelli?
Present, teacher.
Thank you very much, Karen. And finally, we have Lucia Sulema.
Present, teacher.
Okay, thank you very much, Lucia. Great, so I'm gonna be seeing you then tomorrow in order to continue with this. And we're gonna be learning about these theoretical aspects, and then we're going to practice. We're gonna use the entire week, or the rest of the week in this case, to practice for this, because I think it's super practical anyways, all right? So I see you tomorrow. Thank you very much then for having me here tonight, and have a fantastic night, okay? Thank you very much.
My teacher.
Bye-bye, see you, thank
Thank you,
you.
Chair. See you tomorrow.
Bye.
Bye-bye, see you, bye-bye. Thank you very much, see you.